Hi, I'm Scott McLean from Trance Music Mastery. In this video, I will show you how Adam Sabo created a pluck sound like the one heard in Anjunabeach original mix by Above and Beyond. The sound that Adam created sounds like this. Okay, and let's take a look at the MIDI clip. Let me move these windows out of the way. And we have here a A4, then down to C4, A4, down to C4, and so forth. And then it goes up to A sharp, and then down to D sharp. So let me play through the sequence. Okay, let's take a look at the sound map. And Adam Sabo says, pulse width modulation with an LFO controlling the pulse width. A low-pass filter with fast decay to make the sound into a pluck. Lots of reverb with long decay to make it sound big and spacey. So this is a single oscillator patch with a saw wave, and there's an LFO modulating the pulse width. Then the signal flows into the filter with an LP low-pass mid-drive with a cutoff frequency modulated by envelope 2 with zero attack, medium decay, sustain at 0, and fast release. Then that flows into the amplifier with the volume being modulated by envelope 1 with zero attack, medium decay, sustain at 0, and fast release. And then that flows into an EQ with a -1 dB cut near 2 kHz, a +4 dB boost near 600 Hz, a +2 dB boost near 5 kHz. That flows into a compressor and then into a reverb with approximately 5-second reverb tail. Moderate dampening for warmer reverb. And then to the main output. Okay, let's build this patch. And I'm starting from the initialized patch, so let's go ahead and play the sequence as it is now. Okay, and for oscillator 1, what we want to do is enable this invert switch. And what that does is it's not a simple invert operation, so it's not just flipping this wave. What it actually does is create a copy of the wave and inverts the copy. So now oscillator 1 is actually generating two waves, this wave and then a copy of it that's inverted. And with the phase at 0, we get almost no sound. It's actually just a little blip, so I'll play that now. And let me go ahead and increase the phase amount to 50. Okay, we're going to modulate this with LFO 2. And so I'm going to increase that to 50. So a couple observations actually real quick here. We've increased this phase to 50, so let me demonstrate that. This is actually a sound design principle, so let's dig in here. I brought the phase back to 0. So right now it's a saw wave, and we have an inverted copy of that saw wave. So in effect, they're both canceling one another out, almost. Now, as we bring the phase of one of the saw waves up to 50, it'll be offset by 50% basically. And when you do that, you end up getting a square wave. Okay, so let me demonstrate that. In fact, let me freeze that. So what's happening is, because we've created an inverted copy of the saw wave, and we've offset its phase by a certain amount, that amount actually controls how wide this pulse is. So you'll see the pulse be very narrow when we start with the phase at 0, and then as I increase that amount, in effect that phase, or effectively the pulse width, is increasing, okay, until we get to 50, which means the pulse width is 50% of the wave cycle. So let me do that again. Okay, sounds like a square wave, right? Now, if I continue to increase this, the pulse width will get longer and longer. Okay, and we could go up to 100, in which case they cancel out. Okay, so now we have this at 50. Now what we want to do is modulate that width, so the pulse width will be changing. It will be varying between longer and shorter lengths, and that ends up sounding like this. Okay, now what we need to do is lower the amplitude on LFO2. So set that amplitude to 21. We're also going to set the sync to 1/8. Set the shape to triangle. And set the restart to gate. Okay, and then finally let's bring the level of oscillator 1 up. So we'll bring the volume up to 200. And bring width to 0. And let me just check this width. I want to see if this has any effect when we're doing this type of, with the inverted copy of the waveform. Yeah, I don't hear any difference there. So I think when oscillator 1's single wave, then width is not going to have any effect. Alright, so at this point we've got the oscillator configured. The next thing we want to do is set up the envelope. Although we will add some slight detuning to the oscillator. I'll do that after I have the envelope set up. So we want to bring decay to 38.5 and sustain down to 0. I'm going to change sustain first. And we can just now start to hear the hint of a pluck sound. Next, I'll bring the release up to 48.5. And velocity to 0. Okay, now what I want to do, I'm going to apply modulation to the tune, or the pitch of oscillator 1. And we're going to do that with an LFO, and we're going to use LFO1. So we'll modulate tune with LFO1, and just a small amount. Set it to 5. And obviously we want to lower the amplitude on LFO1. We're going to lower that to 3. Set the sync time to 1/8. Set the shape to triangle. And for this, we're going to use delay. We're going to increase that to 12.5, and that will delay for a short time this LFO from taking effect. Okay, and that's it for the LFO setup. Now we want to add a filter, so add VCF1, set the type to mid-drive, and bring the cutoff down to 47. And then add ENV2 as a modulator on the cutoff, and increase the modulation amount to 66. And then we're going to set key follow to 9. And drive to 6.5. Okay, for ENV2 we want the sustain level to be 0. And the decay to be 34. And release, set that to 52.5. And velocity to 0. Okay, that's the basic oscillator and modulator setup. Now what we want to do is go to the effects, and I'm going to add EQ1. And here we're going to set filter 4, bring that up 2 dB, just below 5.5 kilohertz. And then for filter 3, we're going to put a 4 dB boost just below 1.75 kilohertz. And we want to decrease the resonance to 0. And then finally with filter 2, we'll put a slight cut, a -1 dB cut in between 1.75 and 3 kilohertz. Okay, let's do a before and with and without EQ. So this is without EQ. So some very subtle EQ going on here. Next, compressor. For this compressor, we're going to set the type to strong, and I'm going to lower the threshold to -10.5, or set the threshold to -10.5. Set the compression mix to 22.5. And set the attack to 43. And the release to 40. So again, some very subtle gain reduction occurring there. As you can tell by that meter, the gain reduction meter is barely moving. But it's enough, so let's listen with and without compression. That really emphasizes the attack on that pluck sound when we have compression. Now let's add a reverb, and for this we're going to go 100 dry, and wet is going to be 35. And I'll just go through and set the settings here. Range, we're going to set that at 77.5. Feedback, set that to 64.5. Dampening, I'll do that in a second. Speed, set that to 78. And modulation, set that to 38.5. And what I'll do is disable the reverb. Actually, enable the reverb. I'm going to bring dry all the way down. So here's how the reverb sounds right now. So it's got that long tail, and the diffuser settings, we're going to leave those at their default. Now, to warm up the reverb a bit, we're going to cut out some of the high-end reflections, dampening them, by increasing the damp control to 21.5. So let me demonstrate that. So it's slightly warmer than with the dampening set to the default value. And now if I bring in the dry, bring that back to 100. And that's the patch. So now what we can do is play this patch with the bass that was programmed earlier. And that sounds like this. And that concludes the patch for the Anjunabeach Pluck. I'll see you in the next video.